What is poppin' Peacemakers? It is me, MT, and welcome back to the Heavy Spoiler Show, y'all. This is going to be a breakdown of episode 5 of Peacemaker Season 2, titled Back to the Suture, an episode that sees Peacemaker make the friendship-shattering decision to leave his old reality for a shiny new one. So, let us not waste any more time and just jump right into it. The episode begins with the celebration of life of one Richard Bill Flagg Jr., who was slain by the Peacemaker in Corto Maltese during the chaotic events of 2021's The Suicide Squad. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. There's a giant starfish, and it's quite crazy. He kills Peter Capaldi, which is quite messed up. I love that man. But he was kind of a creep in that movie, so never mind. In the DC Comics, Rick Flag Jr.'s middle name wasn't originally Bill, but instead Rogers. Rick Rogers Flagg, with his father being Richard Montgomery Flagg. But in the DCEU, it appears that both the Flagg men share the Bill middle name. And amongst the grieving is Rick Flag Jr.'s favorite bestie with benefits, Amelia Harcourt. As Amelia is lost in her sad thoughts, she is approached by Rick Flag Sr. with the goal of finding out exactly who pierced his son in the heart inside of a South American bathroom. This entire conversation feels like a giant act of manipulation on Rick Flag's part, to be honest. He immediately tells Harcourt to stop calling him General and to call him Rick instead, a move designed to make Harcourt view him as a good friend rather than the father of her dead coworker. He then follows that up by telling her that his son loved her deeply as a friend and wanted her to genuinely be more than that, specifically to make Harcourt feel guilty about withholding any information from him. But most importantly, during their conversation, we learn that it was Rick Flag Sr. himself who planted the idea that Amanda Waller was attempting to permanently stall Harcourt's career in the U.S. intelligence field, a piece of information that has not been corroborated or confirmed by anyone other than Rick Flag Sr., which is suspicious. And like I mentioned before in a previous breakdown, I truly do not believe that this particular statement is true at all. I mean, yeah, I'm sure Amanda Waller was pissed off after Amelia Harcourt and her other co-workers betrayed Amanda Waller by bonking her crazy ass on the head during the Suicide Squad movie, but at that point, she still very much trusted Harcourt to handle Project Butterfly. So I honestly don't believe that Waller was pissed off at Harcourt that much in order to try to completely derail her career, especially since we do see the alternate universe DCEU Harcourt is still very much employed by Amanda Waller in both Shazam Fury of the Gods and Black Adam. So this being said, that statement from Rick seems to be more bullshit to get Harcourt to feel like he's the only person with influence at Argus that she can trust and rely on. Also, Rick could leverage Harcourt's connection to Project Starfish to one day get vengeance for his dead son. And Rick's manipulation appears to work, as Harcourt then vows to make Rick Flag's killer pay for what he did, laying the groundwork for Harcourt's less than inviting demeanor towards Chris at the start of Peacemaker Season 1. But laying the groundwork for style is the Heavy Spoilers merch store, where our new Peace Eagle t-shirt will help everyone know how serious you are about keeping the peace. But if raising awareness to serious disabilities is more your speed, then maybe our shirt promoting bird blindness awareness is for you. You can't go wrong either way because the Heavy Spoilers merch store is where it is at. So take a look through all of our dope-ass nerd merch options today. Then after the intro, we are brought to Kupperberg Park, named after DC Comics writer and editor Paul Kupperberg. And like I mentioned in last week's breakdown, Paul Kupperberg was responsible for the creation of the Task Force X offshoot group known as Checkmate. And we are brought to the benches right outside of Evergreen City Hall. And despite Harcourt using the word copacetic in her text message to Peacemaker, indicating that something was wrong, Christopher's big dumbass decides to show up to the park anyway. And even though it was sorta messed up, Chris using random park goers as human shields was an incredibly smart way to not get lit up by Judo Master with the Judo Blaster. Chris makes his way to the bench where he asks Harcourt if she has any feelings for him before he decides to cross the metaphorical Rubicon to live in the all-white people dimension, the Vermont of the DC multiverse. Harcourt, fearful for Chris's life and angry that he even showed up in the first place, tells him that she feels nothing for him before Argus closes in. And I love how this conversation on the bench kind of mirrors Chris's other conversation with the other Harcourt in the other dimension. Like, that bench conversation went well for Chris, while this bench conversation did not go quite so well. But anyways, Chris then tries to run away by holding Brandon Stanley's Agent Klein over his head as a human shield. And by the way, the hat that Agent Klein is wearing on his head is for the local football team of Evergreen, Washington, the Evergreen Prawns, which is why a shrimp is thrown right in the middle of the hat. And while being held at gunpoint by Agent Flurry, Peacemaker calls him Shaft, referencing the iconic African-American action hero John Shaft, introduced in the 1970 Shaft movie as played by the late, great Richard Roundtree. None of the Argus agents are able to get a good shot on Peacemaker, other than Agent Bordeaux, who we learn has at least one cybernetic eye that helps her aim at Christopher with 99.8% accuracy, which is nuts. In the DC Comics, Sacha Bordeaux first appeared in the pages of Detective Comics 751 in the year 2000 as the bodyguard for billionaire philanthropist Bruce Wayne. Because if there's one soft-ass corporate executive that needs protection, it is Bruce, totally not Batman Wayne. And after being Bruce's bodyguard for a while, Sasha would eventually learn Bruce's big secret and insisted that she continue being his bodyguard even when he is kicking ass and inducing internal bleeding as the Dark Knight. And this kind of forced Batman to train Sasha as his apprentice, which we see him do in the pages of Detective Comics 761. And after she got into crime-fighting shape, Batman would even make her a whole superhero suit and mask in order to keep both their identities safe in the following issue. Eventually, both Batman and Sasha would be framed for a murder that they did not commit and subsequently arrested. And while Sasha was in prison, she would be attacked by another prisoner and killed to death. Just kidding. I mean, yeah, she was definitely assaulted in prison, but she did not die. Because remember that Checkmate Task Force X offshoot that I mentioned earlier? Well, apparently they would step in and save her life with the power of government funding, before asking Sasha to completely leave her old life behind to become an agent for Checkmate. Sasha would eventually climb up to the rank of Checkmate Black Queen alongside the villainous Maxwell Lord, who led the group at the time. However, Sasha had no idea that Maxwell Lord's actions would lead to her blood being infected by thousands of invasive nanomachines called an OMAC virus, which would radically change her body into becoming a metal-plated cybernetic organism in issue 5 of the OMAC Project. This drastic transition would give her enhanced durability, strength, speed, healing, and of course, vision. And as an OMAC cyborg, comic book Sasha's new cybernetic eyeballs made her one of the deadliest shooters around. Something that we almost saw demonstrated in live action if Harcourt didn't save Peacemaker's stupid ass. And if you watched the absolutely excellent Blue Beetle movie from 2023, then you probably remember Project OMAC as being the obsession of Susan Sarandon's Victoria Cord when she was CEO of Cord Industries. And in that film, Victoria Cord was attempting to create a fleet of cybernetic super soldiers using the ultra-advanced alien technology inside of the Blue Beetle's Scarab, a one-man army corps, or OMAC for short. You gotta love a good acronym, because each soldier could basically function as well as an entire army. You get it. One-Man Army Corps was what the acronym OMAC originally stood for when the superhero OMAC was first introduced by legendary writer Jack Kirby in 1974's OMAC #1. The original OMAC was this dude named Buddy Blank, who becomes a one-man army whenever a satellite orbiting the planet called the Brother Eye satellite beams superpowers up his asshole from outer space. It's some weird shit, man. And because the character of Sacha Bordeaux was created decades later, in the New Earth continuity, OMAC stands for something a little different, with the OMAC in Sacha Bordeaux's OMAC virus standing for Omni Mind and Community Virus, controlled by a different Brother Eye satellite that was actually created by Bruce Wayne. Anyways, this all being said, knowing that the events of 2023's Blue Beetle film are mostly, if not completely canonical to this new DCU continuity, and that Sacha Bordeaux's cybernetic implants are tied to OMAC technology in the comics, it would be interesting to see if this new DCU Sacha Bordeaux will have ties to Cord Industries' Project OMAC, with that project even possibly having been absorbed by DCU Argus after Victoria Cord was eliminated. using Sasha's body as an experiment after her car crash. Like, it would be really interesting to see if Project OMAC is still being developed in this universe as a way for regular humans to keep up with the rapid escalation of superhuman threats. I mean, if you've watched the recent Creature Commando series on HBO Max, then you have seen how these cybernetic knights of Pakistan were almost used by the princess to usher in World War III. So I wouldn't be surprised if the United States Army was still interested in such technology despite Victoria Cord no longer being in the picture. I mean, James Gunn did recently hint that Xolo Maridueña's Blue Beetle would be making a cameo at some point in season 2 of this show. So there could actually be a chance that Sasha could connect to Blue Beetle's growing story as well. But anyways, Harcourt, knowing damn well that Chris's head was about to be blown off by Android 18, she quickly leaps into action, an act that Sasha chews Harcourt out later when Chris is brought into Argus HQ. Harcourt then defends herself and tells Sasha to bring her complaints to Argus Human Resources, a line that causes Sasha to smirk before walking away. That particular reaction makes me feel like Sasha knows damn well that Argus isn't about to hire Harcourt again, even after her help with apprehending Peacemaker. Because like I said in my past breakdowns, I'm willing to bet that the only person blocking Harcourt from being rehired is Harcourt herself, as she's begun to devolve into a massively angry, violent, and closed-off individual who likes to fight innocent bar patrons just to take the edge off. Rick orders Sasha and Flurry to leave him alone and disable all the cameras so he can piece up Peacemaker in peace. And while Peacemaker is getting the shit kicked out of him by Papa Flag, Harcourt pulls John Big Puss Economos aside and convinces him to formally book Chris into the Argus system. And when he does, Rick is forced to stop beating the bricks out of Chris, failing to provoke Chris into fighting back and striking a government agent, an offense that could easily land his ass back in prison or worse. But what's particularly interesting and somewhat surprising is how Agent Flurry appears to support John's decision to formally book Peacemaker into the Argus system. Flurry does not appear to be nearly as enthused about Rick Flag Sr.'s clear abuse of power as Sasha is, and wants to do things by the book. And such thing makes a lot of sense when you think about it from his perspective as a black man in America, as he would know the history of excessive force and corruption in American law enforcement. So even though Chris ain't a brother and owns a demon-possessed chaos chicken that sent most of his men into the ICU, Flurry still wants all of his prisoners to be treated with some kind of dignity, which is very respectable. On the other hand, later on in the episode, we see that Sasha is very much supportive of Rick Flag's excessive use of force, as she too cared about Rick Flag Jr. when he was alive and they worked together, which is something that causes me to raise my eyebrow a bit. Because at the top of the episode, we learned from Harcourt at the funeral that Rick Flag Jr. was a bit of a womanizer who made love to a lot of women that he worked with. So maybe Rick and Sasha had a brief fling back when he was alive, much like Rick and Harcourt had. Who knows? All I know is that my boy Rick Flag Jr. had impeccable taste in women while he was alive. Well, except for that one time he dated that demon witch, but in his defense, she did have the face of Cara Delevingne, so I get it. I understand. To show her appreciation for Rick's actions, Sasha begins flirting with him, with Rick favorably insisting that she call him by his first name to show that he's down with being informal. Though I do have a suspicion that Sasha Bordeaux's interest in Rick Flag might not be as innocent as it seems, because in the Prime Earth continuity of the DC Comics, Sasha Bordeaux ends up becoming director of Argus outright. So maybe there's a chance that we are witnessing Sasha trying to use her close connection with Rick Flag in order to get his seat as permanent Argus director. Because as of right now, Rick Flag is merely acting director until a more permanent person can fill his place. And maybe Sasha is trying to be that cybernetic person. And I kind of hope that she is, not just because she's fine as hell, but also because I feel like it would be karma for Rick Flag's subtle manipulation of Harcourt. Also, Sasha Bordeaux's cybernetic eyes keeping watch over Argus in the DCU would fit super well with Argus's logo, which is literally a giant gazing eyeball. But all that is just conjecture and has yet to be seen. And it also makes a lot of sense for Rick Flag to lose his position as acting head of Argus so he could be around and available for the second season of Creature Commandos, the series where his character first appeared in the DCEU. His character is very much still involved with that team and their story, and he can't really do that from the comfort of his office. So I definitely feel like he's going to lose his position very, very soon. And during Sasha's conversation with Rick about his actions, Rick tells Sasha that he had Judo Master tail Chris when Leota and Adrian went to pick him up after he sustained very illegal injuries, with the goal of figuring out where Peacemaker hid his interdimensional portal. And I love how Judo Master's steering wheel is even themed with flames to show his love for flaming hot Cheetos. And while the 11th Street kids are getting their 11th Street asses tailed by Kung Fu Gumby, Red Saint Wild is getting his flesh feasted on by the birds of the forest. Because it turns out, even though he was able to use his spiritual superpowers to track Eagly down, Eagly was able to use their own superpowers to summon a flock of eagles to eat his ass up, specifically ordering those eagles to leave 0 culturally appropriated crumbs behind. This moment is actually a huge deal in DCU history because by establishing Eagly as an enhanced being, this scene officially makes Eagly the first DCU superhero originally created by James Gunn. Now all we need to do is get Eagly to team up with Crypto and Weasel, and we can get a legion of super pets going. Red Saint Wild's death is part of a long-standing tradition in James Gunn-produced projects where the character played by Michael Rooker is brutally killed off in some way. The last time a character played by Michael Rooker died was in the recent Superman film. Michael Rooker was cast as Superman Robot number 1, one of the robots that we saw brutally destroyed when Lex Luthor and his team infiltrate Superman's Fortress of Solitude. And before that, we saw a Michael Rooker character die in the Creature Commandos animated series. In that series, he portrayed a white supremacist who would go on to buy the Nazi-slaying GI robot, a robot that would go on to kill him and all of his racist buddies at the Klan meeting. And before that, Michael Rooker's Savant was ruthlessly killed by Amanda Waller at the beginning of the Suicide Squad film from 2021. And we of course cannot forget when Michael Rooker's Yondu froze to death in the void of outer space at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Other James Gunn projects where Michael Rooker's character suffered a less than favorable fate include 2016's The Belko Experiment, 2010's Super, and the 2006 movie Slither. Michael Rooker's character Vic also had his head sliced in half in the 2012 video game Lollipop Chainsaw, a video game that was co-written by James Gunn. And when Peacemaker gets back to his cabin, Judo Master updates Argus on his position, leading Flurry to hilariously refer to Judo Master as a Dunkin' Munchkin, a reference to the tiny donut balls served at Dunkin' Donuts. Peacemaker then writes a goodbye note for Leota to read to the rest of the 11th Street kids, telling them that his departure is fueled by a belief that redemption isn't possible in his universe, no matter how hard he tries to make up for the mistakes in his past. And this being said, I cannot help but feel like this season of Peacemaker is very reflective of James Gunn's own journey with crossing on over from Marvel Studios to DC Studios, as I'm sure he too started questioning whether true redemption was possible after he was stupidly fired by Disney before making his way to the DC universe. That's just a thought that popped into my mind anyways, because the two situations seem thematically similar. But anyways, after writing the note, Peacemaker and Eagly walk through the rift before closing the rift behind them, leaving the alien rift-making device for Argus. And with no way or time to communicate with Argus, Judo Master decides to jump in after them before the portal closes, making sure to leave a quick note before he does. And while Judo Master being on Peacemaker's ass isn't the best thing for Chris's plans for a new life, I, for one, am so excited and intrigued to see Judo Master explore this new universe. A universe that appears to have nobody that isn't white whatsoever, because the public's reaction to his particular presence there is sure to confirm whether or not Peacemaker's new best dimension ever is actually truly the white supremacist dimension, or even Earth X. Judo Master is for sure about to stick out like a sore green thumb, and I hope to God that somebody tries to start shit with my boy Rip Jagger, because the Vietnamese Green Ranger will absolutely leave hot Cheeto dust on all of their mangled corpses. But eventually Leota finds the note and reads it to the rest of the 11th Street kids. And seeing Vigilante cry during this moment was super heartbreaking, man. Not just because he lost his friend, but Peacemaker didn't really make an effort to say a real goodbye to him, despite Adrian always being around to help him out whenever he needed it. Like, Chris knew that Adrian viewed him as his best friend and brother, but still decided to treat him like an expendable tool that he could easily leave behind.
I'm here too, I'm also listening.
Yeah, I know.
Well, you just said her name twice and not mine, is all. Even though I'm sitting right here.
Hopefully, whenever Vigilante reunites with Peacemaker, he is able to share how Peacemaker's dismissive actions towards him makes him feel so that Chris can make it all right. Because let's be real, I think the last person that Chris wants as a vengeful enemy is Vigilante, because Vigilante is pretty damn good at killing without remorse. Then the episode ends with the song Take Me For a Ride by Bad City, as the 11th Street Kids, of course, reject Chris's goodbye and resolve to bring him back to their universe, giving us yet another iconic James Gunn slow walk moment. Meanwhile, Chris is having himself a great time fighting crime with his brother and dad as part of the top trio, wearing the Peacemaker costume of his dead alternate universe self. And the three of them alone were apparently more than enough to take down a giant kaiju, the very same type of kaiju that we saw Superman and the Justice Gang take on in the Superman movie. This kaiju being killed by the top trio instead of Superman in this universe makes me question whether or not Superman actually exists on this planet, because in the Superman movie, this kaiju is deliberately let loose by Lex Luthor in order to distract him long enough to break into the Fortress of Solitude. But it seems like Superman never really showed up, implying that he might not even be around. It would be wild if Superman was immediately killed by the people of this universe for being an illegal alien and not a pure-blooded human. But that has yet to be seen. But yeah, Chris and the other Harcourt have themselves a big embrace while Chris is covered in kaiju goo and the episode ends. But what doesn't have to end is hanging out with me, which you can do by following me at Mastertainment on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and also on twitch.tv/Mastertainment, where I'll be streaming myself talking Marvel and comic book stuff and nerd stuff, and also playing video games real soon. I would love to see you guys there. But most importantly, follow Heavy Spoilers by hitting that subscribe button and maybe even hitting that like button if you guys enjoy the video. And do not forget to hit up the Heavy Spoilers merch store to get you one of our amazingly designed Peacemaker shirts. But like always, I've been MT, you guys have been amazing, and I'll catch you Peacemakers next time. Peace.